The dot plot.
Dot plot.
The dot plot.
The dot plot is something that at times, I'm glad we have it, and at times it's more of a frustration.
Why has this one chart from the U.S. Central Bank become the de facto monetary policy forecast tool? Now imagine you're at one of the Federal Reserve's 8 yearly meetings. They catch up with their peers, listen to staff presentations, and decide what to do, if anything, about interest rates. But each quarter, the 7 governors of the Fed board and the presidents of the 12 regional banks update their individual forecasts for the current year and beyond. These include projections for the unemployment rate, inflation, all really important numbers. But what we're paying special attention to is the federal funds rate. Let's use the September 2024 dot plot as our starting point.
Now, each dot represents a policymaker's year-end forecast for the federal funds rate, aka the interest rate. At the September meeting, policymakers cut interest rates by 0.5 percentage point to a range of 4.75 to 5%. Zooming in on the 2024 year-end forecast, officials set their estimates between 4 to 5%.
Then they repeat this for the next several years. Plus, there's a bonus dot for what's called the longer run. Now, the Fed doesn't specify how long the longer run goes for, but it's where policymakers expect rates will settle. Eventually. Now you have the Fed dot plot. Question is, how do you read it? Here's my colleague, Reed Pickert, to explain more.
The dot plot tells us a lot about how individual policymakers are thinking about the economy. But because policymakers don't decide on one consensus forecast, it can be helpful to focus on the median dot, aka the dot that has equal dots above it and below it. Again, using the September 2024 dot plot as a guide, the median policymaker sees rates ending this year in a range of 4.25 to 4.5%. The median dot for 2025, however, is between 3.25 and 3.5%, a full percentage point lower. Investors would typically read that as a signal the Fed could likely lower interest rates 4 times next year. Now, to be clear, these are individual forecasts, not a decided upon path of policy. Policymakers can choose a different path at any time based on how the economy is evolving in real time, and they often do.
Thanks, Reed, but I gotta ask, if officials aren't even bound to this,
then why does it even matter? Because FOMC statements focus on current economic conditions and the interest rate target. The dot plot offers a look into the Fed's thinking beyond that.
The dot plot was introduced and adopted by the FOMC as a way to be transparent about the diversity of views. That's why it's individual dots.
And we love transparency. So does that necessarily mean that we love the dot plot and it's great and it's world peace and everything's wonderful, right? Not necessarily. Maybe some of the biggest issues some people have with the dot plot is that 1, it's not exactly a consensus forecast, but rather a jumble of individual projections. And 2, it's anonymous. So this dot could be Chair Jerome Powell, or it could be Susan Collins from the Boston Fed, or Atlanta's Raphael Bostic. And they could all have different ways of calculating their projections. The issues raise questions over how well the dots accurately reflect longer-term FOMC intentions. Even Fed chairs are a little meh on the dot plot. Often, they dismiss them as irrelevant or outdated.
One should not look to the dot plot, so to speak, as the primary way in which the committee wants to or is speaking about policy to the public.
For dot plot. Honestly, it's actually proven to be pretty good at doing its job, such as in June 2023, when policymakers refrained from hiking rates. But because the dot plot showed more increases to come, it did play a role in avoiding any bursts of investor exuberance over the tightening cycle being over. There's beauty in the duality of the dot plot. They love it, they hate it, it's cryptic yet crucial. But for better or worse, the dot plot remains a tool in the Fed's arsenal that hopefully you now know how to read.